Hi everybody, my name is Katie Royals and I'm really excited to be speaking to you all today as part of FreezeDebt's Virtual Finance Festival. By way of introduction, I am a financial journalist, a personal finance writer and a blogger. My blog, The 20%, came second in the UK Money Bloggers Best New Money Blog category in its awards in March. So today I'm here to talk to you about ethical finance, in particular sustainable investing. This is a topic I'm personally really passionate about, but is also a very hot topic in the industry at the moment and is gathering a lot of momentum. So hopefully you're going to be really excited about it too. But first, please do bear in mind, I'm just here to offer you some background information and some hints and tips of things you might like to consider. I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not qualified to give financial advice, so please always do your own research and don't be afraid to seek professional advice before making any major financial decisions. I think a good place to start today is to discuss what ethical finance actually is and whether it is possible to make your finances ethical. So, ethical finance is commonly used to describe finance which takes into account not only financial returns, but also environmental, social and governance, or ESG, factors. ESG is going to be quite an important term in this talk, so keep that in your mind, but park it for now. We'll come back to it in a couple of minutes. So by that definition, I think we can all agree it is definitely possible to make your finances ethical, and the best thing is anyone can do it. One of my favourite things about ethical finance is that there's actually no right or wrong way to do it. It's all subjective, and it's about doing what works best for you and your morals and your beliefs. So if you've heard that and you're thinking, great, that sounds cool, I want to get involved in ethical investing, here are some of the steps you can take. In terms of ethical finance, most people say the easiest step you can take is to start investing sustainably. And this is because as an investor, you actually hold a lot of power. You decide which companies you support with your money, as well as a shareholder, you get a vote and you can use that vote and voice to change companies' actions and drive positive, sustainable change, if you wish. There's a big debate about the best way to do sustainable investing. When it sort of first came onto the scene, the main thing was divestment. So ESG, sort of the original ESG fund simply wouldn't invest in tobacco companies or arms manufacturers or fossil fuel companies, for example. Since then, things have moved on slightly, and some fund managers now believe that investing in, say, fossil fuel companies that are making a big effort to reduce their carbon emissions and look at renewable forms of energy are worth investing in because you can support those actions as a shareholder and encourage change. This is an ongoing debate, and again, there's probably no right or wrong answer. It's all up to you and where you sit. There might be certain things which you absolutely don't want to be invested in. For example, there are certain religious funds that will not go near any alcohol companies or tobacco companies, which is absolutely fine. You can do this however you like. I guess this is where we come on to one of the problems with sustainable investing. Because it's so subjective, there are also a lot of allegations of greenwashing and companies sort of labelling funds ESG or sustainable simply because they don't invest in, say, a tobacco company or an arms manufacturer. That's not to say that this is wrong and they're not technically ESG funds. One of the things the industry is lacking at the moment is a strict criteria for what counts as ESG. And equally, I would say, although greenwashing is obviously bad, it's much better that people are thinking about things and trying to take positive steps than simply ignoring it altogether. So if you're still sold or considering sustainable investing, here are some more things you should consider, because unfortunately it's not quite as straightforward as just clicking on an ESG fund and forgetting about it. Although it can be, if that's how you want it to be. The thing you've firstly got to decide is what it is you want to change. ESG, or environmental, social and governance, encompasses a wide range of problems and companies. So it might be you want to focus particularly on climate change and companies that are reducing their carbon emissions, Or perhaps social justice issues are really important to you, whether you want to support companies that are doing a lot for LGBT plus inclusion, or to support ethnic minorities in the workplace. That is all up to you and what issues are most important to you. It's also, at this point, worth deciding whether you're going to invest in certain funds or individual companies. Funds are perhaps slightly easier, and if you have less money to invest, might make you more impactful because you become part of a fund, and the fund manager can use that voice in shareholder meetings. And shareholder action does work. We've seen recent examples of major fossil fuel companies being pressured by shareholders into changing their practices. Equally, you might like to invest in individual companies. If you decide to do that, again, that's absolutely fine. You're just going to have to do a little bit more research because, as we said, there's no set ESG criteria that companies have to adhere to. So every company you want to invest in, you have to look into and see if it fits your own criteria and if it aligns with your morals and beliefs. If you're struggling to decide which bit of ethical finance or sustainable investment you want to focus on, I would recommend looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of these, which range from different things from equality and inclusion to positive education for all to tackling climate change and keeping our oceans clean. A lot of large financial companies have signed up to the UN's Principles for Responsible Investment, and there they will state which sustainable development goals they are aiming to tackle or help with. It's also one of the problems with sustainable investing is that things move very quickly. I'm sure you've all seen the news about BrewDog and Oatly in the past few weeks. The thing is, a few weeks ago, both those companies would have been hailed as good sustainable investments for most people. But BrewDog, suddenly due to allegations of a toxic workplace culture, and Oatly, because of its threatening to sue a smaller oat milk company, have suddenly gone down in a lot of people's estimations, and now there are debates as to whether they can be considered sustainable or ethical investments. When you get involved in ethical investing, it's quite hard to keep up with everything, and you don't have to. You can sort of make a decision that this is the fund and I'm going to stick with it and I'm not going to make any major changes, which, as we know of investing, it is good to hold your investments for long term, and buying and selling on an impulse isn't always a good idea. But equally, you might want to try and keep up with what's going on, because if, say, social justice and employee rights is one of your big goals, would you want to be investing in a company with a toxic workplace culture? Well, at this point, it's probably worth mentioning they are still currently just allegations. We will have to wait to see where that goes. So that's quite a lot of talk about investing. But I know investing isn't for everybody, and some people may worry they don't have enough money to invest at the moment, but they still want to make their finances ethical. And this is still completely possible. I think one of the easiest places to start is with your workplace pension, which, due to auto-enrolment, the vast majority of employed people will now have. And I never realised this until about a year ago, but it is so easy to move your pension into an ethical fund. I just simply happened to be logging on to check how my pension was doing about a year ago, and I saw you could click and see which fund it was invested in. And by default, it had gone into the standard growth fund, which, again, there's nothing wrong with for a lot of people. But I realised there was an option to move it to a sustainable fund. So at the click of a button, I had moved where my pension was invested, which was really exciting. And again, this has a lot of power because it might not be the perfect sustainable fund. It's almost certainly not the fund I would build if I was doing so myself. But I'm part of a much bigger pension, and so that sustainable fund has a lot more power than me as an individual. It also shows the pension companies that people do want sustainable funds and there is demand for it. The more people that move their funds, the more they focus on the sustainable fund because they realise it is important to people. And if enough people move, who knows, perhaps it could become the default option in the future. Another thing to do, if you want to make your finances ethical, is to consider all your purchases. Whether we like it or not, money plays an incredibly important part in society, and we can't deny that. And with every purchase, you are making a conscious decision and a statement, whether that is in what you invest in, or a card you buy a friend, or even what you buy in a supermarket. And I think so often we sort of forget this, and you look at, say, fast fashion companies, for example, which do serve a purpose and do support people on low incomes so they can afford nice clothes, which is very important. But if you're not only able to afford very, very cheap clothes, maybe you want to consider looking in charity shops or on your local high street, or at least in more sustainable brands. For example, one fast fashion brand earlier this year was selling dresses for about 4 or 5p. It doesn't take an Einstein to work out that can't be sustainable, and somewhere along the supply chain someone is almost certainly getting cut out. Also, this encourages people to buy more than they need. And obviously a lot of people buy with the intention, I'll buy 4 dresses and I will return 3 of them. As we know, we don't all have that self-control, and often we end up keeping it. The problem is, even if you do have the self-control and do return the items, often they just end up in landfill because it's far more effort for the companies to sort them out and clean them and sanitize the items and sell them to someone else than it is just to get a new one, particularly at the price they're selling them at. So it's also can be an idea to support local businesses. Again, I have one friend who runs a small local business, and she says every time she makes a sale, she does a happy dance, because you are genuinely supporting her paying her mortgage, or her buying her food shop, or whatever it is. Bigger companies like Amazon, it's quite hard to imagine anyone is doing that. But again, it's up to you. You might think it's absolutely fine to spend your money at Amazon because they've made a commitment to reduce their carbon emissions. And for me, the important thing is that you're thinking about it and you're making conscious decisions rather than mindlessly spending in a way that might not benefit society or the environment. So I think that's hopefully given you a few things to think about, and I hope it's raised some interesting points. I certainly find it interesting, but hopefully you did too. If you were to take away one thing from this talk, I hope it's that there is no right or wrong way to make your finances ethical. The most important thing is that you are thinking about it and making the right decision for you and your morals and beliefs. Please, please, please always do your own research, and don't just do something because you saw someone on TikTok or Instagram doing it and they made it look cool. If you're ever in doubt, do seek independent and professional advice. There are some really great organisations out there, from debt advisors and debt charities to wealth managers and investment advisors. So do take up that advice because it will really, really help you. And thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed this talk, which obviously I hope you have, please do find me on social media, where I'll also be really happy to answer any questions you might have. I'm most active on Twitter, where you can find my handle as Katie20%. And that is also the name of my blog, which is the 20%. And if you type that into Google, all in the full words, you will be able to find my blog, and you'll see more posts where I discuss everything really, but particularly there's a lot on sustainable and ethical finance on there. Thank you so much again for listening. I hope you take away some of these points and consider making your finances a little bit more ethical, and enjoy all the other talks in the festival. Thank you.